All right, we are going to learn how to do the back stitch because it is probably the most universal and most used stitch and the easiest to start for the beginner, and it creates very clean, seamless lines, especially when you're working with words or thinner lines, and it is probably one of my favorite to work with. So what you're going to do is, now that you have your needle threaded onto your thread, you're going to flip the back of your project over, and you're going to stick the needle through the top of where you want to start with your project. I usually try to start where, especially if I'm working with words, as if I was writing it. So however you would naturally write a word or a letter, that's where I would stick my needle through first to start the project. So in this case, on this B, I'm starting in this corner here. So you stick the needle through the back and you sort of eyeball it and sort of feel on the back of where you want to see. And also it is a little see-through, so you could just turn it over and stick it right on the end there. So you're going to stick your needle through, and you don't want to pull it all the way. You're going to pull it to about there where you have a little loop on the end. And also to note, when you start your project on your thread, you want to have a tail. So where you pulled the needle through, you have a little tail like this. I would keep it on the shorter end. Don't, make it even where the end meets the other end. You want it to be kind of a little tail towards the top of where you're working, as you don't want this tail to ever get caught in your stitching. And you'll see as I'm going along how that works. So once you pull your needle through, you have this little loop on the back. You're going to come up, I usually say about a rice length above where you put the first stitch from the back, and you're going to go through the top. And you're going to go down, following your pattern, flip your project over, and then you're going to loop that loop over the needle. And then you're going to pull through carefully, and then it secures onto the back like that. So you have nice, clean, locked in thread into that hoop. And you're going to flip it back over, and you're going to, again, come up about a rice length from the back, like so. Pull it through. And then to connect your thread, you are going to put it back through the hole of the previous stitch. So you're going to stick this down through here into that hole so they connect, and then pull it up through the back. And then you just repeat the process, and it is really that simple. I know it takes a few times to practice and see how it's done, which is why I love videos, because you can sort of just watch it and just watch it on repeat to kind of get the hang of it. But you always want to go back, put the needle up from the back of the project, and then the next move is down through the front of the project, and you're always connecting the thread to itself, so it creates this nice seamless line. So then I'm going to put my needle back down from the last stitch in the hole that it connects from the top, pull it down through the back, and then come up again about the same length down and pull it up. And then you just repeat this process until you get to a point where you would need to, where you sort of get to a dead end. So I can show you what happens when you get there. So I'm just going to keep stitching and probably do a little fast forward or cut through to the end. Also to note, when you are stitching, I always hold the tail end of the thread with my finger on the back so it doesn't get tangled with itself. So see how I put my thumb there, push this through, so then there's nothing in the back. And then I do the same thing, where I pull it over to the side so it doesn't get tangled. Pop it through, down. And if your thread comes to a crossroads, I sort of just cross over the thread. I don't pick up on either side of it. I just kind of cross over. Okay, now we're getting to the last couple stitches here, to the end of this letter. So I'm just going to pull these through. And since the B doesn't really connect to the R, we're just going to finish off this letter and then start again from the R. So I'm going to pull this through, and then I'm going to turn it over. And this is what it looks like on the back, nice and clean. So, you know, since I have some more slack here, I'm probably going to weave the thread on the back till I get down to this R. So then I can keep using thread. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to stick the needle back under the thread here. I'm not poking it through on the other side. I'm just sort of lightly squishing it underneath these threads here to sort of weave down the project. So I'm pulling these through, and just be careful not to poke it through to the other side, because you don't want the needle to pop through and cause a rogue thread going through your project. But I just work my way down. This is how you finish off projects too, but this is also how a way that I can seamlessly move down the back of the project if I need to start threading from a different point. So now that we're at the bottom of the B here, I'm really close to this R, so I'm just going to poke through to start on my next letter. And you come up, and then you just start back stitching all the way up again. And I will just keep going here. Okay, now I'm getting towards the end of my strand. See, my tail got a little smaller as I kept pulling through the project. And I don't have too much more to work with, so I'm just going to do a couple more stitches here, because then we're going to have to start a new thread. Just going to adjust this really quick. Okay. I'm just going to go to the end of this letter here so we can start fresh with the letter A. Strands got a little tangled here, but I'm just going to straighten them out. Okay, so once you go to do your last stitch, when you want to finish off this thread, we're going to do the same thing. We turn it over and we weave it the back of the project, just like a few weaves up through the letter on the back. Just going up my E here a little bit. I could do like 4 or 5. And then once I get to that end there, you're going to want to make a knot. So to do that, you take the needle, put it through as if you were going to keep weaving it, and then you take the strand like this and go in the inner circle of the thread here. See how I made a little loop right like that? So I stick the needle through underneath the thread and I pull it up like so, and then the thread is coming through the little hoop here, and then I just pull it. And then I usually do that one more time, where I just go back under the same spot, stick the needle through, so it's through this little hoop, above the hoop, and then I pull it up like this. And then your project's knot, and you pull your needle out. And then you want to snip the end of this so you don't have a tail on the back so it doesn't get caught. And then you're ready to thread the needle again, and continuing with the letter A and through the rest of the letters. All right, so I went back, I pulled 2 more strands out from the last grouping of strands that we pulled out from the larger bobbin. And I did the same thing again where I folded it in half to make the loop on the end and makes 4 strands all together. So I put my needle through my threader, pull this, just gonna pull that like that. We're ready to start on the letter A here. So go to the back of the project. And in this case, we could actually even start up on the corner of the A. If you had a long enough strand that you wanted to keep going from your E or whatever letter you're working with, you can just keep flowing up the letter and then loop back up around, and then do that little weaving trick on the back to get yourself back up to this point to then continue the letter. But in this case, since we ended at the end of this letter here, I'm just going to start up here. Little loop on the back, stick the needle through. Stick it through my little hole back here. Kind of left it a little too long, but it's okay. Pull it through and it secures. And then we'll just keep going. Okay, I just got to the top of my T and I just wanted to show you, anytime you have a T or an I where there's an extra line or dot that goes with the letter, I just stitch right over the stitching, and I don't cut the strands or anything. I just keep the project flowing. So I went to the top of the T here, and on the back, I'm just gonna pop up through the line that crosses, and then just stitch that in. And then once your needle goes back to the back again, I just pop it up down where the line continues. I know some letters can be a little tricky when you're embroidering, but kind of just always using those tricks of weaving on the back to keep the lines clean, to get yourself to another point. If you want to pop the needle up through another point, if you get to the end of a word, or a letter, I should say. And then if you're crossing a T or dotting an I know an I would be above the letter. I sort of just put the needle up through the top of the I and then down, and then I just keep working from the back instead of cutting thread or starting over again, because it's not really necessary to do that. So for the rest of this letter, it's actually it's pretty fluid. So I'm just gonna keep going up to the H, to the bottom, and then up this way. And I will meet you at the end. Okay, so I'm just at the end of my letter here. So I'm just gonna do that last stitch. Looks like I ended on an E again. And I don't have too much thread left, so I'm just gonna try to use as much as I can with my tail here. And you know, if you don't have too much on the end and you got kind of close, it's okay. You can probably just, you know, I'll probably just do like two weavings in the back here. And then stick my needle under and create that little loop again. Put my needle in between the 2 strands of thread and then pull up. And it creates a little knot. Do one more time. Up, through the hole, and pull through. And then my word is done and ready to move on to my flowers. I'll bring this up a little closer so you can see the stitching. Great job.